All guests on ZASLOW Show 2.0 brought to us by the official beer of the program, Johnny Cuba. European roots with that Caribbean soul. Grab a refreshing German lager in a can. You can pick up a six-pack, your local Sedano's, Presidente, Winn-Dixie. How else are you going to enjoy the weekend? Of course, remember, always drink responsibly. And don't forget Johnny Cuba's mantra, stay tranquilo. And joining us now is our pal, ESPN SportsCenter, ESPN Radio, Randy Scott, who I will be doing Freddie and Harry with this afternoon. So you're listening to Randy Scott and myself right now. You're going to get done with this, and then you're going to turn on over to ESPN Radio, and you're going to hear us do a bunch of national stuff. That's how it's done, Randy Scott. How are you today?
I'm great, buddy. I know. Dude, you're going to be so sick of me by the end of the day. Forget about the audience. You're going to be so sick.
No, this is a perfect opportunity. We'll do the national stuff. We'll get you on here. We'll be just a couple dopey guys chopping it up about stuff that is not important. Now, on a day like today, I mean, you did SportsCenter starting at 7 a.m. What is your day like when you're doing SportsCenter that early? I mean, because you got to do makeup, you got to get ready for TV and all that stuff. Take us through how you get ready for SportsCenter on a day like today.
So I make tough hours even tougher because I live up outside Boston. So on a normal day, I wake up at 1:30 in the morning, and I get on the road at about 2:15. You got to be in at Bristol. You aim for 4. You know, depending if you stop for gas or whatever. Maybe it's like 4:15, but you try to be there at 4. You write the show. You look at the highlights. You mark up your shot sheets. And listen to sound bites that you're tossing to within the show. Like, you know, today we had Jeremy Schaap in Paris. You don't want to step all over what Jeremy Schaap's about to say. So you listen to his report, and then you make sure that you tee it up, you know, appropriately. You do all that I usually take 2 hours to do that. And then that gets you to 6. I'll go get coffee. I'll have already had coffee, believe me, somewhere on the road, on the Mass Pike or something. Then I'll go get some more coffee, head up to get dressed, and you know, put the makeup on, try to cover up the bags, and then do the show from, you know, weekdays is 7 to 8 is live. Sometimes 7 to 9 is live, depending on like if there's Formula One or Little League Baseball or whatever you're leading into. The second hour is always on E2. The first hour is, you know, regular ESPN. You hand it over to Get Up and get out of the way. On the weekend, though, when I'm with Gary Streisky, Saturday, Sunday mornings, 3 hours. 3 live hours, you know, any measure of guests. Sometimes the hours are very similar. Sometimes it's a completely different show 1 hour to the next. But that's usually the day. And then you get done with that. Sometimes not as much as I'd like. Sometimes you try to make yourself work out. The ESPN gym is incredible. There's a gym on campus. You try to make yourself work out before you get in the car, because I know if I get in the car and I drive, you know, a better part of 2 hours, hour 50 or whatever home, by the time I get home, I'm just going to want to rack out. And I can cobble together. I can't remember the last time I slept 8 hours all the way through. I can cobble together 6 or 7, maybe, you know, 4 overnight, and then 2 hour nap, 3 hour nap, that sort of thing. Like I'll take a serious nap when I get home, like middle of the day, big old nap. Like I'll take a nap in between our shows today. You know what I mean? Like before radio, I'll try to recharge a little bit, so you're not, you know, your back's not killing you by the end of the show from carrying it.
So on a morning, night, morning, however you want to look at it, like today, you're able to get to sleep at 7 p.m., 8 p.m., and to wake up at 1?
No, I wish I could. Last night I was an idiot, but one of my friends, Jason Fitz, who I don't know if you ever worked with him at ESPN Radio, but he's sort of tapping back into his musical roots, and he's a tremendous. He went to Juilliard. He plays violin, plays a fiddle, and he is in demand with touring musicians. So Collective Soul was here at the Xfinity Theater last night. They're playing with Hootie and the Blowfish. But
wow, that's a great show, Randy.
So fun. But Collective Soul was like, hey, like they have this song, The World I Know, right? That features prominently this, you know, beautiful violin. Fitz is local. They don't have to fly anybody in. Fitz knows so many people. They tap him in. They're like, hey, you want to come in, sit in with us, play this? And you know, and they worked out a deal, and Fitz was like, I have all these passes. You guys want to come see the show? We're like, yeah. So I actually spent the night in Hartford last night, which meant I could go to this concert, still get to bed by like 11, slept till 3:15. So that's 4 hours and change. That's 4 hours is a typical work night for me, you know? that stinks because like if you back time 4 hours from like, 1:30 when I wake up, I'm not seeing a lot of West Coast baseball. I'm not seeing a lot of like playoff games, NBA playoff games on the Western Conference. Like I get caught up. I'm such a company shill, but like I listen to SportsCenter all night on my you can get everything you need to know in a half hour. I listen to that on the drive. I put that commute to work for me so that I can sound like I know what I'm talking about. Sometimes crazy games are ending live while I'm awake. Like sometimes you can see some of this stuff. The Olympics, we watched Xander Schauffele in Olympic golf this morning at like 4 a.m. at the show pod. So it's a different life. And dude, growing up, high school, college, a night owl. I was such a night owl. I was never a guy at all. But for your dream job, you have things have a way of changing.
How did you come to realize that you and Gary Streisky work so well together? And how does that work? Like does someone notice that, oh, these guys work really well together, so let's always put them together on the weekends?
No, that's not. I got really lucky, and I got really lucky with Nicole Briscoe before Gary. I was with, again, like as soon as I moved up to the Boston area, they started the 7 a.m. I was not on the original list of people to do that show. And then after a few months, they were like, hey, you can think on your feet. Want to bring you in. Can't guarantee you how much real estate you're going to have on this 3-hour show. A lot of voices, Kevin Negandhi, Jay Harris, Jamie Sire, Serena Morales, on down the line. But, get in where you fit in. And I was like, all right, great. That turned into then doing the 7 a.m. when Sage Steele came back to SportsCenter. And that was really my first time I felt like I had a foothold, like a home. And then Sage went to the 6 p.m. show. They brought in Nicole, and it was just, there was no testing where it's like, hey, let's see how you work with Nicole. Let's see how they just look at Nicole and they're like, she's a great sense of humor. She is a true sports fan. She's not faking it. And let's see how she works with Randy, and we just caught lightning in a bottle, and it was like working with my slightly older sister. I have to say slightly. It was like family right from the jump. And then they decide that they want to move Nicole to nights where she's absolutely taken off. And they wanted consistency. They didn't want it to be a rotating list of anchors. And they tapped Gary, and he had some SportsCenter reps to be sure he's kind of floating around and filling in, but also was very active and still is very active SportsCenter on Snapchat and digital streaming and TikTok. And that's what he's brought to our show.
He's really good at that kind of stuff. Like, I'm not good at any of that. He's really good at it.
Yeah, like 300,000 TikTok followers or something. Like he is the most enterprisingly creative anchor I've ever worked with. And in such a comparative business, in such a jealousy or envy filled business, that people would get upset, maybe potentially saying that, but they would agree. Like he comes up with things, knows what trends are popular, what sounds are popular, and finds a way to not necessarily use it in our on-air show, but use elements of SportsCenter for social media. And it's like Zaz, do you have kids?
Yeah, 2 teenage boys. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if like with your boys, you've suddenly maybe started playing more video games more often, or learned the lingo a little bit, or gotten on different social media apps. But like what I find, so I have an 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 7-year-old, and I have a Roblox account, and then got back on the sticks on PlayStation, Nintendo Switch, I'd never played before in my life until I had kids. Like, you meet your kids where they are, you got to meet them where they are. Gary's done that with this 2024 audience. You meet the audience where they are. When we go out, and we're friends off air, like I'll crash at his house sometimes, like go out to dinner. Like when we go out, people might recognize me from SportsCenter. People of a certain age and younger recognize him from Snapchat. They're like, that's the guy. That's the man. Give me that guy. It's Gary. That's, whatever. And they dap him up and they talk to him. And when we can get those two audiences overlap, like that Venn diagram is where the audience grows, and it's just where it's going. And I mean, he's my guy. I've been so fortunate. It's a really long answer to a simple question. I'm sorry. But like I started working with Nicole in 2018. It was the year the Caps won the Cup. So like from 18 to now, I've been so lucky to have the consistency and, more importantly, the quality of just people that I've been able to work with.
What is the most hectic or wildest breaking news on SportsCenter story you've had to maneuver?
Boston Marathon bombings. That was so going back to 2013. I was in my first full year at the company. I started in June of 2012. And we were in the old SportsCenter studio. Excuse me. We're about to do what we called a friends and family SportsCenter. It was the old 3 p.m. SportsCenter on ESPN News because the only people who would watch were your friends and family. And it was Patriots Day. And again, I lived up outside Boston, and I'd worked for the station, rather. I worked for Nesson that has the Red Sox rights. So I knew what Patriots Day meant. And I also knew, logistically where things are in the city. So when my ex-wife texted me and said, there's something going on at the finish line, she goes, it looks like an explosion. She's watching it on the CBS affiliate live in Boston. She's pregnant with she's home, with our firstborn. So she's watching it. She's texting me what's going on. We're about to go on. This happened at 2:50 in the afternoon. We're about to go on. And I've got this, now looking back on it, this embarrassing on-camera lead into the Red Sox highlight. Because remember, the Red Sox game starts 11 in the morning that day. So I've got this lead in that's this aw shucks, the city of Boston is so productive on Patriots Day, and they get more. It's like that old Army commercial, they get more done before noon than most people do in a day. And I'm like, there's blood at the finish line. There's been an explosion, and I have to react as such. And we got a little tussle, a little tug of war with our producer, who is like, no, I have to go by what the news desk says, and I have to go by what the AP wires say and our news wires. So no, we're not going to say there's an explosion. We're going to say that, authorities are on this, whatever we're going to do, be very, very safe with it. And we ended up scrapping my on-cam, doing the highlight, breaking news going to break. We'll have more when we come back. There's been an explosion at the finish line, and then it's all happening in real time. And you realize the news gathering power of ESPN. You realize the reach of ESPN. And for the next 2 hours, I got to kind of lead it because, frankly, they couldn't get Bob Lee in soon enough.
Right.
They couldn't get Jeremy Schaap in soon enough. So I got to hold down the fort. And it was because I literally knew the streets. They were taking aerial shots, and they're like, Randy, what is this? And I'm like, that's Boylston. Okay, what's the parallel street? That's Newberry. Okay, what's the connecting street? That's Dartmouth. Okay, what's that there? That's the Lord and Taylor, which ended up being the security camera that spotted the kid in one of the terrorists in the polo hat, and the rest is history. But I knew what I was looking at. I knew what it meant. I knew the third Monday of the month was Patriots Day, and it always has been, and blah, blah, blah down the line. And I remember getting a young woman on the phone who had run and was unharmed, but could also not reach her parents. And so she's by Stephanie's on Newberry, this popular street that gets even more or popular restaurant, gets even more popular on Patriots Day. And we're talking to, Stacy from San Francisco, and we're like, you're flying by the seat of your pants. There are no scripted questions. It's like, are you okay? What did you see? And she's starting to get emotional on the air because she's finally talking about it. You can tell she's processing it. And it's like, hey, Stacy, is there anybody you want to tell you're all right? Because you can't get a call out. You've told us your cell phone's jammed and you just want to talk to your parents. And I don't know if her parents saw it. I don't know if her friends saw it or whatever. But you realize in that moment that you're also truly a network of communication, right? You could possibly connect to people. So that was, I am not, if I wanted to do news, I would be in news. I love that 90% of the job is sports and who wins and who loses and the human interest stories and all of that and the history and the moments that come from it. When there's hard news, there's a part of me that a little bit that dies inside because it's never good. It's never good. And it increasingly over the last couple of years, it's polarizing. It's people having different takes on a fact, how people can spin facts for either side sometimes makes your head spin. But that was something where it was hard, really hard news. It was a really tragic event, and we could be a part of how people kind of processed it in the moment. And that was I remember driving home and not listening. I drove an hour 50 home and didn't have a single thing on the radio and didn't listen to anything and just sort of drove in silence, kind of processing everything that had happened. And eventually you get a tap on the shoulder and it's Bob Lee, at his Bob Leeist. And he comes, he's like,
I'm here. Everything's okay now. I'm here.
Yeah. Like that seat was a lot heavier after I left it in terms of the gravitas that entered the room. And there's no, my co-anchor that day, he turned to me, and Jorge Andres, who's amazing. And he turned to me and he goes, "There's no shame in stepping aside for Bob Lee and Jeremy Schaap." And I was like, absolutely not, absolutely not. So that's one. And there have been others, I was lucky enough to be on the desk with L. Duncan when Kevin Durant announced he was going to the Warriors. And that was this like long awaited thing that finally happened. And it's just, sometimes you're in the right place at the right time in terms of just being at the controls of the ship. When something pops up on the radar.
That is an excellent story, Randy Scott. I'll let you go with something a bit lighter, although I did really enjoy hearing that. Greatest SportsCenter anchor is who?
Stuart Scott. I met Stuart in both auditions that I had for Dream Job. Do you remember that show, Dream Job?
Yes, I remember Dream Job. Yes. You were on Dream Job?
I would never made it to the final 10. The best I did was make it to the round of 30 where they cut it to 10. So I was in the room for the second season where Stuart's at the front of the room and he tabbed the 10, and one of them was named Whitney Scott. I'll never forget. And she was this very talented young woman, but she was also she had my last name and Stuart's last name, and she was from Oakton, Virginia, which is the neighboring town to Vienna where I was from. And I was like, there's no shot they're going to have 3 Scotts and 2 people from Northern Virginia. Yeah. So it was just like, I knew right away I was toast, but he was so gracious. Like, he was so kind to me. And then I get to ESPN in 2012 and summon up enough courage. I never did a show with him, never, but I was often on the 8 p.m. show that handed off to him in like SVP. And I finally worked up the courage to be like, we're in the same studio. I was like, "Hey, Stuart, like, my name's Randy Scott, tried out for Dream Job." Just, verbal diarrhea, just motor mouth. And he was like, "Yeah." And he like took a step back, appraised me, elevator eyes, toes to nose. And he was like, "Well, you made it. Well, you're here, And I was like, "Yeah, I am." Like, Stuart Scott says I'm here. Like, how cool is that? You know what I mean? So I thought that was pretty neat. But anyway, I thought sorry, I got to be on the move. I'm about to get a parking ticket. I'm going to try to get up.
All good.
But I did think that Stuart was the first pop culturally relevant. I love Dan Patrick. I thought Keith Olbermann was great. Craig Kilborn. Right. I'm of that era, even though my parents would never spring for cable, and I always had to watch it at a friend's house. But Stuart was the first one that was a rock star. He was a rock star, and he put in the work. There was so much stake to that sizzle. And I got unfortunately see him at the end of his time at ESPN, but he was a guy. I remember doing a show with Jonathan Coachman, again, that 8:00 show, and Stuart and maybe SVP is supposed to be on it after us. And a pretty high up producer comes in and says, "Stuart's not feeling well. We need somebody to stick around for the 11." And that's an E1 show. It's Scott Van Pelt, who himself was on his way, man, like meteoric, on his way up to being a star of his own right. And they said, "Can one of you guys stick around for SVP?" And they went with Coach because he'd been there longer and he was Coach. And I was bummed, but I was also like, what's wrong with Stuart? Because nobody knew he was sick. And then turned the corner. I walked down this X Games hallway, and here comes Stuart. Like, nothing's wrong, And it was because he was getting chemo in his office, then going and doing the show. And it was, that's Superman stuff. But that's how much he gave a damn. That's how much he cared. And the quality of his shows never waned, man. He is a force of nature. So no, he's my answer for sure.
That's a good answer, Randy. Excellent job here on your debut appearance on ZASLOW Show 2.0. Again, for folks, you're listening, or if you're watching on the YouTube channel, you're listening right now, you now head on over to ESPN Radio. Randy and I are doing 3 to 7 p.m. Eastern, filling in for Freddie and Harry on ESPN Radio. I enjoyed this, Randy. I'm looking forward to this afternoon. We'll chop it up on a bunch of different sports for 4 hours. All right.
Yeah. Plenty of time. We'll explore the space. Thanks, Zaz. Appreciate you, buddy. Thanks for having me.